In this presentation, I want to go over the rules of politics according to Selectorate Theory. The authors here, when it comes to the rules of politics, first of all, Selectorate Theory, as always, the bulk of it is contained in The Logic of Political Survival by Bruce Bueno de Mesquita, Alastair Smith, Randolph Siverson, and James Morrow. That's the academic big book with all the math in it. Now, Bueno de Mesquita and Smith later published the Dictator's Handbook, where they apply the ideas, they take what they learned in the logic of political survival, and they talk about, how that plays out. And they call it the Dictator's Handbook because they have found, kind of their conclusion from the logic of political survival is that bad behavior is always good politics. And it's in this second volume that they offer 5 rules of politics that I'm going to go over here. The first rule of politics, and if you've seen the original basics of the model, you'll recall that W is the size of the winning coalition. And so rule 1 that they say is keep your winning coalition as small as possible. The small coalition allows a leader to rely on only a few people to stay in power. Fewer essentials equals more control and contributes to more discretion over expenditures. So you want to keep your coalition of powerful people as small as possible. And, in the book, they noticed that Kim Il-jung, who at the time was still around, they said, he'd done an excellent job of keeping his coalition small. And Kim Jong-un hasn't been has kept up his father's business. And, a lot of times in these situations where dictators, they shed supporters, they turn on major supporters. And very often what that is about cutting down, paring down the winning coalition. And in dictatorships, they frequently get away with it because, you get rid of a powerful, like in the Kim's cases, you get rid of an uncle. That's one less person you got to worry about, and you're also all the goodies you used to give, the private benefits you gave the uncle, you're able to redistribute to the other people. And so in the Dictator's Handbook, Bueno de Mesquita and Smith give they give examples of times when dictators have sometimes just by murder gotten rid of, pared down their coalition, and the guys who remain stick with them because getting rid of somebody, hey, it wasn't me, and now I get more goodies as a result. So that is a big thing. The key thing, though, small coalition. Do everything in your power to keep your coalition small. Large S, large selectorate. Keep the nominal selectorate as large as possible. And that is to say, you want to have a lot of what they call the interchangeables, people that can, so you can replace, you want to have a lot of people up and coming who are deemed in some way in communist systems as members of the party. You want to have a lot of these people who are eligible to come in and take the place of anyone in your coalition. And you want to keep the people in your coalition, and like I say, not just your coalition, but the real, the influentials and essentials, the other supporters. You want to keep them aware that they can be replaced, and that is a big part of keeping your system stable and keeping you in power, right? And this is how you stay in power. So you want to be fostering the grassroots of your party and having, you don't want to keep, you want to have some path to the top apparent for a lot of people to keep them as part of your selectorate. Controlling the revenue. This is a huge thing. And I just like this point. It's better for a ruler to determine who eats than it is to have a larger pie from which the people can feed themselves. Right? And the most effective cash flow for leaders is one that makes lots of people poor and redistributes money to keep select people, i.e. your supporters, wealthy. And this is a huge thing. This talks about the essence of, I don't need to work to keep my country rich. What I need to do is work to keep my country, keep control of who eats, who gets what money. I need to control the economy as much as possible. And I need to be in charge of directing funds to the right people. And so maintaining control over the flow of revenue is very important. And, the key thing is if everyone in the country is doing well, if you have a nice middle class country, a lot of people go, yeah, I'm tired of politics. I'm just going to chill out. Right. Better to be Zimbabwe, where you're just poor. And if you want any kind of living in the country, you've got to be you've got to be in board with the ruling party or the ruling, whoever the dictator at the time is. Used to be Mugabe. And, you've got to keep, the idea is to not support the leader is to fall off a cliff, right? And so that's why you see a lot of poor, these dictatorships. Poor is good, and this is one of the things that really comes out from Selectorate Theory is that these dictatorships, these small coalition systems, just don't have an incentive to make life better for the average person. They do have an incentive to keep control of revenue, and so foreign aid programs that are run through the government, awesome. Loans to the government, awesome, because that's money coming into us. And it goes also into the resource curse, where countries can that are selling oil or other natural resources, well, the money comes to them directly, especially if they own the company, right? If they own, and if they've nationalized the oil companies, which honestly most countries do, then that's another way to keep control of the revenue. And also, when you sanction countries, when Putin was sanctioned over the Crimea, the sanctioning gave him an excuse to get government control over certain, the commodities that were being sanctioned, and, gave him cover to get involved more in the market to replace those goods, and gave him more control over the economy. It became a reason for the government to be more active, and thus a way for him to exert greater control over revenue, over the way the economy worked. And so you've got to be, that's a big thing. Control of the economy is really what these guys want, not growth of it. It also plays into the why nations fail arguments of Acemoglu and Robinson, and I wish they had a nice name like Selectorate Theory for their stuff, but their institutional approach, they often talk about, their view is that countries that have in their what they call extractive political, non-democratic political institutions are going to tend to have extractive economic institutions. And they recognize that growth can occur in a country like China, but they say in the end, the country isn't going to continue to grow because at some point they're going to worry, the country, in their view, an authoritarian regime can allow the country to grow as long as they control the revenue. And they don't like the free market system as much because it allows revenue to grow in new and strange places, especially when we talk Schumpeterian growth, which is based on innovation. And that's all Acemoglu and Robinson, right? But it dovetails very nicely with this Rule 3 that Selectorate Theory has derived. Rule 4, don't pay too much to your supporters. Pay your supporters just enough to keep them loyal. Right? Remember, they'd rather be you than be dependent on you. And so you've got to keep, the next rule is going to be about keeping them happy, but, don't pay them too much. You don't want them to get too rich because that's resources. You want to keep them somewhat in the dark, and you want to keep them dependent on you. So you give your coalition just enough so they don't shop around to someone for someone to replace you, but not a penny more, right? And so you got to draw a line with your supporters. Be careful of that. Rule 5 is pay enough. And, they put it in terms of, as I say, this is the flip side of the last rule. You got to pay them enough. And, do not take money out of your supporters' pockets to make the people's lives better off. And a lot of things that people will want to do in life, especially when we talk about in developing nations and liberalizing economies and privatizing things, in a lot of cases, you'll be taking money out of some key supporter's pocket if you do a lot of market-based reforms, right? If somebody has a monopoly or if there's a state control of an industry, which is sort of the same thing, and you give that up, well, what happens there, right? And sure, the country may be better off, but so don't think that in order to make the country better off or to achieve some goal, that you're going to buy credibility with for other reasons that will offset the loss of your supporters, getting paid. And one of the examples they give, they talk about in Tsarist Russia, how the Tsar had, done away with they banned drinking for World War I because we're going to fight the war, so we need to not have vodka. And well, that's how they made their money, and a lot of their supporters got rich off of selling the vodka. And they basically they cut off their revenue both to the Tsar and to key supporters. And they got swept up, as the rules would say. The Tsar gets swept up in fighting a war and neglects keeping key supporters' private benefits flowing to the key supporters. And this is one of the things that leads to the breakdown of support. So, this is the other thing. Don't stiff your supporters. And so these 5 rules are, as they put it, this is bad behavior. These are not rules we want people to follow. These are not at all good governance as we would think of it, but it's good politics. And their book has a somewhat pessimistic tone, the Dictator's Handbook. First of all, just the title tells you something. But kind of their idea is that, look, the things that dictators do, this is what they do. Right? They say these 5 things. This is what a successful dictator does. And when they violate these rules, you tend to see problems develop. And it's bad behavior, right, from one point of view, but it's good politics, and that's the subtitle of their book. So those are the 5 rules, and in this series, I'll probably have a couple other things coming out, but I hope this has been beneficial to you.